The party was a loud, glittering thing, a testament to my daughter-in-law Fiona's ambition. It was held in the penthouse apartment she shared with my son, David, a space so aggressively modern it felt less like a home and more like a statement. White walls, chrome fixtures, and vast plate glass windows that displayed the city skyline like a piece of expensive, impersonal art. The air was thick with the scent of competing perfumes and the sound of a particular kind of laughter, sharp, loud, and meant to be heard. I sat in a low, angular chair that was profoundly uncomfortable, a glass of water leaving a perfect, cold circle on the napkin in my lap. My role at these events had long been established. I was the quiet, benign presence in the corner, a piece of familial scenery that lent a touch of wholesome tradition to Fiona's carefully curated gatherings. I was the living embodiment of my husband's lovely mother, a role I was expected to perform with quiet grace and minimal intrusion. Tonight, the performance felt more strenuous than usual. Fiona was holding court, a slim, elegant figure in a dress the color of champagne, her voice a bright, brittle thread weaving through the conversational din. Her friends, a collection of women with expensive haircuts and expressions of curated boredom, clustered around her. They spoke of summering in the Hamptons, of frustrations with interior designers, of the near impossibility of finding good help. As I watched, I did what I always did. I saw a guest looking for a place to set down an empty glass, so I quietly rose, took it from her hand with a small smile, and carried it to the kitchen. The kitchen was an immaculate laboratory of stainless steel and white marble. I rinsed the glass and placed it in the dishwasher. It was a simple, automatic gesture, the muscle memory of a lifetime spent tidying the wake of my family. When I returned to the living room, a new guest, a woman with a severe haircut and a dress made of something that looked like black leather, was admiring the view. "Fiona, this apartment is just divine," the woman said, her voice dripping with the particular envy that Fiona craved. "The space, the light, you must have paid a fortune." Fiona let out her signature little laugh, a sound like ice cubes clinking in a crystal glass. "We got obscenely lucky. David found it through a connection. It's a pre-war building, solid as a rock, but the owner is some ancient recluse who hasn't raised the rents to market rate in 30 years. We basically stole it." At that moment, I was passing behind the sofa with a small tray of discarded canapé napkins. Fiona turned, her eyes sweeping over me, and she smiled at her friend, a sly, conspiratorial smile. "Of course, keeping a place like this clean is a full-time job," she said, her voice carrying across the room. She gestured towards me with a flick of her wrist, a gesture one might use to summon a waiter. "Thankfully, we have Eleanor. She's an absolute treasure. David's mother, you know, but honestly, she's better than any maid service I could hire." "Edie?" The woman in leather gave me a brief, dismissive glance, the kind one gives to the staff. Fiona wasn't finished. She looked directly at me, her smile unwavering. "Eleanor, dear," she said, her voice sweet with poisoned honey. "You've been pottering about all evening. Why don't you be a love and start on these dishes? They're just piling up, and I'd hate to wake up to a mess in the morning." The room did not fall silent. The music did not stop. The earth did not crack open. A few people heard. Most did not. The insult was not a thunderclap. It was a quiet, precise stiletto, slipped between my ribs so skillfully that only I would feel the wound. "I the maid. Treasure, better than any service she could hire." I looked at her, at this woman my son had married. I looked at her expensive dress, her perfectly manicured nails, her face that was a beautiful, hard mask of insecurity. And I felt nothing. Not anger. Not hurt. The feelings were so far beyond that, they had circled back around to a profound, hollow calm. It was the calm of a deep, cold lake into which a single final stone had just been dropped. I looked for my son. David was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, talking to a man with a loud laugh. He had heard her. I knew he had. I saw the muscles in his jaw tighten for a fraction of a second. I saw his eyes dart towards me, then quickly away. He gave a tight, uncomfortable smile, took a sip of his drink, and turned his shoulders slightly, angling himself back into his conversation. He had not defended me. He had not corrected her. He had chosen, in that instant, to do the easiest thing: nothing. He had chosen to manage the social awkwardness by pretending it hadn't happened. His silence was more painful than her words. Her words were a symptom. His silence was the disease. For years, I had believed my role was to be the quiet foundation upon which their glittering lives were built. I had provided the soft place to land, the unconditional support, the silent, ever-present love. I saw now that they had not seen me as the foundation. They had seen me as the basement. Necessary, perhaps, but dark, and best left unseen. "Of course, dear," I said to Fiona, my voice steady, betraying nothing. I gave her a small, serene nod. And in that nod, the decision was made. It was not a hot, impulsive thing. It was a cold, quiet, and perfectly logical conclusion. Like a master chess player who suddenly sees the entire board and the final, winning move. I knew exactly what I had to do. I walked to the kitchen. The sink was already filling with delicate wine glasses and plates smeared with the remnants of expensive cheese. I turned on the warm water. I picked up a single plate, a small, square thing that probably cost more than my weekly groceries. I washed it carefully, rinsed it, and placed it in the drying rack. One plate. A symbolic act. A final service rendered. Then, I turned off the water. I dried my hands on a linen towel, folded it neatly, and placed it on the marble counter. I walked out of the kitchen, through the living room full of laughing strangers, and to the hall closet where I had left my coat and handbag. Quietly, I let myself out of the apartment. The sound of the heavy door clicking shut behind me, a sound of profound finality. I had not been dismissed. I had resigned. My journey was the shortest I had ever taken. It was a simple descent. From the 12th floor penthouse to my own apartment on the 7th floor, in the same building. As the elevator hummed its quiet mechanical tune, I felt not like I was fleeing, but like I was retreating to my own embassy, a sovereign territory where their rules and their language held no power. I slid the key into my lock, a heavy, old-fashioned brass key, not a plastic key card, and the door swung open into a different world. Here, the air did not smell of perfume, ambition, but of beeswax, old books, and the faint, lingering scent of the lemon verbena soap I favored. The light was soft, golden, cast by lamps with silk shades, not by recessed, clinical spotlights. The furniture was old, dark wood, worn smooth by the passage of a lifetime. Every object in this room had a story, a history. It was a home, not a showroom. It was mine. I placed my handbag on the console table in the hall. As I did, my fingers brushed against the symbolic object I carried everywhere, the one thing that defined my true relationship to this building. It was a small, heavy ring of solid brass, holding a collection of antique, ornate keys. There was the key to the roof, to the boiler room, to the wine cellar, and the master key. The one that could open every door in this 12-story testament to my late husband's foresight. I closed my hand around the keyring, its weight a familiar, solid comfort in my palm. It felt like a scepter. The journey of discovery was not a physical one. It was a journey into memory, into the paper and ink reality of my life. I walked into my study, a room lined not with white, empty walls, but with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, groaning with the weight of literature, history, and poetry. I sat down at my desk, a large mahogany partner's desk that had been Thomas's. He had bought this building, the Ardmore, 35 years ago. "Bricks and mortar, Eleanor," he used to say, tapping the thick prospectus with his finger. "It's the only thing that's real. People will always need a roof over their heads." He had been a quiet, shrewd man, a man who understood the difference between the flashy glamour of the stock market and the solid, reliable value of a well-maintained brownstone. After he passed, 10 years ago, the management of the Ardmore had fallen to me. David had been busy with his own burgeoning career. "You handle all that, Mom," he had said, waving a dismissive hand. I wouldn't know where to start. Just put the profits in a trust or something. He had no interest in the details, in the quiet, steady work of it. He saw it as a quaint hobby, a little something to keep his widowed mother busy. He had no idea of its true value, no concept of the portfolio it represented. When David and Fiona were looking for a larger apartment after their first child was born, they had complained endlessly about the outrageous prices in the city. One afternoon, I had made a quiet suggestion. "There's a lovely penthouse apartment available at the Ardmore," I had said. "Perhaps you should look at it." "That old place?" David had said. "Isn't that where you live?" I had arranged the viewing. Fiona had fallen in love with the view, and I had, without telling them, become their landlady. I drew up a lease agreement through the management company that handled the day-to-day administration, a company that knew me only as the principal of the ownership corporation. I set their rent at 1/3 of its market value. It was a gift, a silent, ongoing subsidy to make their lives easier, to ensure my grandchildren had a beautiful home. A gift they had mistaken for their own cleverness, for having basically stolen it. I unlocked the main drawer of my desk and pulled out the thick, leather-bound ledger where I still kept the core accounts in my own hand. Thomas had taught me the principles of double-entry bookkeeping, and I found the methodical, logical process deeply soothing. I opened the ledger. The paper was thick, creamy, the blue lines precise. I turned to the page for apartment 12 Edo. There it was, in my own neat cursive script. A monthly entry. On one side, the column for market rent, with a number that would have made Fiona's eyes water. On the other, the column for rent received, with the much smaller number from David's monthly bank transfer. And beside it, a third column, one I had created just for this purpose. Familial discount. The number in that column, the amount I forgave each month, was a quiet testament to my love. It was a secret I had held for 7 years. Looking at the neat columns, at the stark financial reality of my generosity, the last vestiges of any lingering hurt evaporated, replaced by a crystalline, cold resolve. My granddaughter had not called my gift cheap. My daughter-in-law had called a maid the maid. She had done so in a home that I owned, a life that I was secretly funding. The irony was so immense, so staggering, it was almost comical. As if on cue, the intercom on my desk buzzed. It was a direct line to the building's front desk, a feature Thomas had installed. I pressed the button. "Yes, Miguel." "Evening, Mrs. Gable," came the warm, respectful voice of the night doorman. "Just wanted to let you know that new tenant in 8C is complaining about the radiator making noise again. I sent Mr. Soto up, but I thought you'd want to be aware." "Li Khan." "Thank you, Miguel," I said. "You were right to let me know. Tell Mr. Soto to schedule a full replacement for that unit tomorrow, and just bill it to the corporate account as usual." "Will do, Mrs. Gable. Have a good night." "You too, Miguel." I switched off the intercom and sat back in my chair. Mrs. Gable. The owner. The one who makes the decisions. The contrast between that brief, respectful exchange and the scene in the penthouse upstairs was a chasm. Up there, I was Eleanor, the help. Down here, I was the one who kept the heat on. The discovery was not that I had power. I had always known that. The discovery was how profoundly I had misused it. I had used my power to make myself smaller, to make myself invisible, to allow them to live in a comfortable, subsidized illusion. I had done it out of love. But I saw now that a love that requires you to erase yourself is not love at all. It is a form of self-abdication. My journey down 12 floors had been a journey back to myself. I was not the maid in their story. I was the author of my own. And it was time, I realized, to write a new chapter. I did not sleep that night. I did not toss and turn with anger or replay the scene at the party in my mind. Instead, I sat in my quiet, lamplit study until the first pale gray light of dawn began to creep over the city skyline. I was not stewing. I was planning. I felt like a general, finally seeing the whole battlefield with perfect clarity, mapping out a campaign that was not about retribution, but about the calm and orderly restoration of reality. By the time the city was fully awake, my course of action was set. It was a two-pronged approach, elegant in its simplicity. It involved 2 phone calls and 1 carefully worded letter. The intrusion from their world came sooner than I expected. It was not a phone call from David, full of stilted apologies, as a small, foolish part of me might have once hoped. It was a text message from Fiona, which buzzed on my mobile phone around 10 in the morning. I had left my handbag, with my phone inside it, in the penthouse apartment in my quiet departure the night before. Miguel, the doorman, had retrieved it for me that morning with his usual discreet efficiency. The message read, "Hope you're not sulking about last night." It was a joke. "Anyway, I think you forgot to finish the dishwasher. The caterer's platters are still on the counter." Ooh, wait, action. I looked at the message on the small screen. Sulking, got. AKA joke. She truly saw me as a petulant servant who had walked off the job in a huff. She felt no remorse, only irritation at a task left undone. The text was a gift. It was the final piece of evidence I needed, the confirmation that my decision was not just right, but necessary. It erased any lingering wisp of doubt. I did not reply. Instead, I began my campaign. My first call was to Mr. Harris, my lawyer. He was a dry, meticulous man who had taken over the practice from his father, who had been Thomas's lawyer. He handled all the corporate filings for Ardmore Holdings ALZ died. "Eleanor," he said, his voice crackling slightly over the phone. "To what do I owe the pleasure? I trust everything is in order." "Everything is in order, Robert," I said. "But I would like to make a small change. It's regarding the lease on Penthouse A." "The apartment your son resides in?" he asked, a hint of caution in his tone. "The very one," I said. "I have been reviewing the terms. The lease is, of course, in the name of the management company, as are all the leases in the building. However, I believe it's time for a standard annual review. I would like you to draw up a notice of a rent increase, effective at the start of the next quarter, to bring the unit to fair market value. Please include a market analysis from a certified appraiser to justify the new rate." There was a profound silence on the other end of the line. Robert Harris knew exactly what the rent on that apartment was, and he knew exactly what its market value was. He knew this was not a simple administrative adjustment. "Eleanor," he said, his voice careful, "that would represent a substantial increase. Over 300%, if my memory serves." "Your memory serves you perfectly, Robert," I said. "It is a substantial increase. It is also the correct rent. Please have the notice delivered to the tenant by registered mail as soon as possible." "And the familial discount ledger?" he asked quietly. He was the only other person who knew of my private accounting. "You may shred it," I said. "It is no longer relevant." He did not argue. He was a lawyer. His job was not to question my motives, but to execute my instructions. "As you wish, Eleanor," he said. "I will see to it immediately." My second call was to a woman named Isabella Rossi, the owner of a very high-end, very discreet domestic staffing agency. I had found her number in a glossy magazine in a doctor's waiting room years ago and had kept it, for reasons I hadn't understood at the time. Her agency provided maids, butlers, and household managers to the city's elite. "Rossi resourcing, Isabella speaking," a crisp, professional voice answered. I explained what I needed. Not for myself, but for Penthouse A. I requested a full-service, white-glove cleaning crew to be dispatched the following morning. 4 staff members. They were to do a deep, comprehensive cleaning of the entire apartment. I was very specific about the tasks. I authorized them to wash, dry, and put away every dish, to polish every chrome fixture, to clean every window until it was invisible. "And the billing?" Ms. Rossi asked. "Who is the client?" "The client is the resident, Fiona Gable," I said. "However, you will send the invoice directly to me, at apartment 7, in the same building. Please include a full itemized list of all services rendered. I will be paying for it as a gift." Very generous of you, madam, she said. I believe in paying for good service, I replied, and the call was concluded. The old world, Fiona's world, had intruded with a text message that morning, demanding that I, the maid, finish my work. My response was not to argue. It was to hire a team of professionals to do the job properly and to present her with the bill for what my service was actually worth in her world. And at the same time, I had set the wheels in motion to present her with the bill for what the roof over her head was actually worth. I had not raised my voice. I had not sent an angry text. I had simply and quietly begun to dismantle the illusion that her life was built upon. I had established a new reality, one based not on her assumptions, but on the clear, cold, and entirely fair principles of the open market. I had not been hurt or angered by her intrusion. I had been motivated. The climax was not a single dramatic event. It was a series of quiet, powerful moments that unfolded over the following week. A slow-motion demolition of the world my son and his wife had built for themselves. The first moment came 2 days after my calls. David called me. His voice was strained, confused. Mom, what is this? Some cleaning service just showed up at the door. 4 of them. Said they were sent by you to finish the job. Fiona is completely freaked out. It's some company called Rossi Resourcing. They look like they're about to fumigate the place. No. They're not fumigators, David, I said calmly, picturing the scene with a certain grim satisfaction. They are a professional cleaning crew. Fiona was concerned about the state of the kitchen, so I took the liberty of hiring the best. I thought she would appreciate it. I'm paying, of course. You're paying, he said, bewildered. But why? You could have just… I don't know. I could have just come up and done it myself? I finished his sentence for him. Yes, I suppose I could have. But I've decided to retire from that particular role. I felt it was time to let professionals handle it. Do let me know how they do. I'm told they're very thorough. Oh, no. He was silent. He did not understand the move I had made. He only knew that the board had changed, that his queen had been put in check by a piece he had long considered irrelevant. The second moment, the true climax, arrived 4 days later. It came in the form of a certified letter delivered to Penthouse A. I knew the exact moment it arrived, because my phone rang less than 5 minutes later. It was David again. But this was not the voice of the confused son. This was the voice of a man in sheer, panicked disbelief. A letter, he said, his voice a choked whisper. Mom, we just got a registered letter from a law firm, Harris, Blackwood, and Finch. It's a notice of a rent increase. Yes, I said. I was expecting that might arrive today. Expecting it? It says the rent is going up to $12,000 a month. $12,000! That's impossible. It's a mistake. It has to be a mistake. It's not a mistake, David, I said. It is the fair market value of the apartment. Mr. Harris included the appraiser's report, I believe. Market value? What are you talking about? We have a deal. We've been here for 7 years. The owner, he stammered, his mind scrambling to hold on to the foundations of his world as they turned to sand beneath him. The owner is some old recluse who never raises the rent. That was the deal. It was time. David, I said, and my voice was soft, gentle, but it carried the undeniable weight of absolute truth. There is no old recluse. That was a story you and Fiona told yourselves because it was more comfortable than the truth. What? What are you talking about? He whispered. I am talking about the Ardmore, I said. Your father bought this building in 1988. When he passed, ownership transferred to the holding company. And I, my dear, am the sole director of that company. I am the owner. I have been your landlady for the past 7 years. The silence on the other end of the phone was the most profound silence I have ever heard. It was the sound of a universe collapsing. It was the sound of a man's entire reality being unwritten in a single paragraph. I could hear his breathing, ragged and shallow. You? He finally managed to say. The word was a puff of air, a ghost of a question. Yes, me, I said. The rent you have been paying has been a gift from me to you. A familial discount of over $8,000 a month, every month for 7 years. A gift I was happy to give. But I have come to realize that my gifts are not appreciated, and my presence is, at times, misunderstood. So, I have made a simple business decision. The discount is discontinued. The apartment is now available at its correct price. Ah, said Yuan. I did not have to mention the party. I did not have to say the word maid. He understood. In that moment, he understood everything. The years of quiet subsidy, the reason he had stolen, the apartment, the true context of Fiona's casual, cruel remark. It all came crashing down on him at once. I have to go, he whispered, and the line went dead. I sat in my armchair, the phone in my lap. I felt no triumph, no elation. I felt a deep, quiet, and somber sense of order restored. The climax was not his pain or his shock. The climax was the truth, finally spoken. It was the pulling back of a curtain that I myself had hung years ago. That evening, I opened my leather notebook. The page was blank. My hand holding my favorite fountain pen was steady. 1. Things I now understand about ownership. 1. You can own a building, but you do not own the people in it. Their respect, their love, their kindness, these are not assets that come with the deed. They must be earned, and they must be reciprocated. 2. A gift, when it is not acknowledged as a gift, becomes an expectation. And an expectation over time hardens into a perceived entitlement. My greatest mistake was not my generosity, but my silence. 3. There is a profound difference between being a foundation and being a basement. A foundation is visible, respected, and understood as essential to the structure. A basement is taken for granted. I allowed myself to become the basement. 4. The market can be a cruel thing, but it is also in its way perfectly honest. It assigns a value without sentiment. By applying the simple, honest logic of the market to my own life, I did not act cruelly. I simply acted honestly. 5. My name is Eleanor Gable. I am not the help. I am the owner. And the most important property I own is not this building. It is my own self-worth. I have decided, finally, to stop renting it out for free. I finished writing and closed the book. The epiphany was not that I was powerful. It was that I had a right to use my power in my own defense. I had a right to be seen not as the maid in my son's house, but as the architect of my own life. The week following my revelation was a week of absolute profound silence. There were no more calls, no angry text messages, no unannounced visits. It was as if Penthouse A had detached from the building and floated off into a silent orbit of its own. I knew this was not a silence of peace, but a frantic, panicked calculation. I imagined the conversations happening up there, the frantic tapping on mortgage calculators, the desperate searching of real estate websites, the slow dawning horror as they confronted a reality they could no longer afford. My return during this time was not to my family, but to the building itself. I began to walk the halls of the Ardmore with a new sense of purpose. I was not just a resident of Seving. I was the custodian of this entire vertical village. I started speaking with the other long-term tenants, people I had only ever nodded to in the elevator. I listened to their stories, their small complaints about a leaky faucet, their fondness for a particular doorman. I had lunch with Mrs. Rosenthal from 9 Key, a sharp, funny woman who had lived here even longer than I had. We discovered a shared passion for detective novels. I was rebuilding my life not on the unstable ground of my family's affection, but on the solid foundation of my own community, my own interests, my own responsibilities. The building, which had been a quiet, passive investment, became a living, breathing entity to me. It was a community I had neglected, and I was now, slowly, rejoining it. The inevitable confrontation occurred 10 days after my call with David. My intercom buzzed late one afternoon. It was Miguel from the front desk. "Mrs. Gable," he said, his voice hesitant. "Your son and his wife are here in the lobby. They would like to come up to see you." He said it as a question, not a statement. He was asking for my permission to grant them access to my home, a courtesy he had never had to extend before. The power dynamic had shifted, not just for my son, but for everyone in the building. "Thank you, Miguel," I said. "You can send them up." I did not tidy the apartment. I did not put on a pot of coffee. I simply sat in my armchair in the living room and waited. When the doorbell rang, I did not rush to answer it. I took a slow, deep breath, then walked to the door. They stood in the hallway, two figures framed by my doorway. They looked smaller than I remembered, stripped of the protective glamour of their penthouse. David's face was pale and drawn. Fiona's was a careful, neutral mask, but her eyes, usually so hard and bright, were shadowed with a fear she could not quite conceal. She was not carrying a designer handbag. "May we come in?" David asked. His voice was quiet, stripped of its usual confidence. "Of course," I said, stepping back to let them pass. They walked into my living room, a space they had not been inside for over a year. They looked around at the worn, comfortable furniture, the walls of books, the scent of lemon verbena. It was the home of the woman they thought they knew, the quiet, accommodating mother. It was also the home of the woman who held their future in her hands. The cognitive dissonance seemed to paralyze them. They did not sit. They stood in the center of the room, like defendants before a judge. It was Fiona who spoke first, her voice a brittle, rehearsed whisper. "Eleanor," she said, avoiding my eyes, her gaze fixed on a point somewhere over my shoulder. I want to apologize for my behavior at the party. It was thoughtless, inexcusable. I was trying to be funny, and it was cruel. I am truly sorry." It was an apology, of a sort. It was the kind of apology one makes when one has been caught and is facing the consequences. It lacked the resonant frequency of genuine remorse, but it was a start. "Thank you, Fiona," I said, my voice neutral. I did not say, "I accept your apology." I simply acknowledged that it had been given. Then it was David's turn. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a storm of emotions I could not begin to untangle. Anger, shame, confusion, and a sliver of something that looked like dawning respect. "Mom," he said, his voice thick. I don't even know what to say. I knew about this building. Dad told me, once, years ago. He said he was leaving it to you to manage, that it was your security. And I just forgot. It was easier to forget. It was easier to let you be just Mom. He swallowed hard. And at the party, I heard what she said, and I did nothing. There is no excuse for that. It was cowardly. This was different. This was not a rehearsed apology for a specific transgression. This was a confession. This was the pulling back of a veil on his own character. I simply nodded, allowing his words to settle in the quiet room. "We can't afford the new rent," he said flatly. "It's impossible. We'll have to move. We'll have to take the kids out of their school." He said it not as a complaint, but as a statement of fact. He was finally acknowledging the reality of the situation. "Yes," I said. "I imagine you will." This was the moment. The moment where the old Eleanor would have rushed in to smooth things over, to offer a compromise, to rescue her son from the consequences of his own actions. They were waiting for it. I could feel their desperate, unspoken hope filling the air in the room. I stood up and walked over to my desk. I picked up the leather-bound ledger, the record of my silent generosity. I did not open it. I simply held it. "This building," I said softly, "is a business. Your father taught me that. And a business must be run on sound principles, not on sentiment that is not returned. The rent for Penthouse A is $12,000 a month. That is the reality." Jan. I saw Fiona flinch, a barely perceptible tremor. David's face fell. They thought this was my final judgment. However, I continued, a good business owner also understands the value of reliable tenants, and you have for 7 years been very reliable in your payments. I looked directly at David. So I will make you a business proposition, not a gift, not a familial discount, a proposition. I paused, letting them wait. You will sell your car, the ridiculously expensive German one you can't really afford. You will use that money to pay off the credit card debt you've been hiding from your mother for the last 2 years. You, Fiona, will get a job. Not a part-time vanity project, but a real, full-time job that contributes to your household income. You will both come here, to this apartment, once a month for dinner. Not a grand party, but a simple dinner, where we will talk to each other like a family. And you will treat my home, and me, with the respect that any landlady is due. If you agree to these terms, I will agree to a new lease. The rent will not be what it was, but it will be a figure that is manageable for 2 working adults, and not for a prince and princess living in a fairy tale. Nein, ein. They stared at me, dumbfounded. I had not offered them a pardon. I had offered them a path to redemption, but it was a path paved with responsibility and hard work. I was not giving them a fish. I was telling them it was time to learn how to fish for themselves. The relationship was not fixed in that moment, but it was, for the first time, beginning to be rebuilt on a new, more honest foundation. A foundation of truth, of consequences, and of mutual respect. David, his eyes shining with unshed tears, gave a single, slow nod. Fiona, after a long internal struggle that was visible on her face, did the same. The next month, the ridiculously expensive German car was gone. A week later, Fiona sent me a short, simple email telling me she had accepted a position at an art gallery. And on the last Sunday of the month, they came for dinner. It was awkward. It was strained. But it was real. And as I watched my son help me clear the plates from the table, I knew that my journey was not over. It had just entered a new, and far more promising, phase. I was still the owner. But now, they knew it too.